Well, here's an interesting thought. Listen to these words here. Persons who are not Canadian citizens and who do not reside in Canada can exercise an Aboriginal right. Interesting thought. And it's not my thought, it's the Supreme Court of Canada's thought. And it's all because of this man on the other side of the screen, Rick Desautel. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Alan.
Now, there are a lot of famous court cases in history. And as you know, living on the what is now the American side of a new international border for you and your ancestors, there's Brown versus Board of Education on the integration of schools. There's McCulloch versus Maryland on interstate commerce. And here in what is now Canada, there's the Ron Corelli decision on Jehovah's Witnesses restaurants being padlocked in Quebec. And now there's R.V. Desautel, and you are the Desautel. That's a really interesting place to be in history. Have you processed this yet? It's only been a few weeks.
No, I have not processed it, Alan. The scope of it is, I feel, yes, very large. The part of a United States citizen having rights in Canada kind of puts me back a little bit, and think of the part of my ancestors being very proud of me at this point. Yes.
Well, sure. And you can think of it as you have rights in your ancestors' territories in what is now Canada, but how you think about it is up to you. And as a matter of fact, we all kind of have this bit of a push me, pull you inside us. We are citizens and residents of states, provinces, regions. We have ancestors or clans, as in the Scots. How do you feel about the order of operations of all your citizenship?
If I'm understanding your question correctly here, my citizenship was always here in the Northwest. As colonialism took us over, they just stamped a name on us as citizens of the United States. And as for the First Nations people up in Canada, the same thing in that line there.
Now, tell me the origin of this, because from my reading, I understand, for example, Martin Luther King and many of his associates and people struggling for human rights picked Rosa Parks because she was a great person to sit at the front of the bus beyond reproach. And I guess you have to be if you're going to go through a court case. Did anybody pick you, or did you pick to do this, or how did your activity of coming up into what is now Canada and hunting an elk, how did that come to pass?
I was working for the Colville Confederate Tribes Fish and Wildlife as a game agent and as a traditional hunter. I've had some experience with the road blockade. I knew a lot of the country up there. I knew a lot of the people. When it came time for a decision of who to send up there, because of my ancestry and my connection with the country and my genealogy that defines me as a Sinixt and stuff like that there. And then my volunteerism to go up there and do it, yes.
Now, how did you feel? Were you, I mean, I assume you had a license for your long gun and you had a driver's license and you crossed the border in a normal way. Did you have an American passport?
Mm-hmm. I had American passport, but what I was using was my enhanced driver's license across into Canada.
What year was this?
Boy, back in the 80s, we was just, the border was very lenient on identification. You just used your Washington State driver's license. It wasn't until the issue came up on the enhanced driver's license that British Columbia put that into effect. And I can't remember the year that was, but I knew I had to get one. So as I was getting my enhanced driver's license, I decided, well, I'll get a passport too, because it's about the same route to get your enhanced driver's license as it is to get a passport.
Now, before that, I'm old enough to remember we sometimes just waved at the border guard, and sometimes we accidentally crossed at a road that didn't have a border crossing in it, but that's ancient history. So you come up in the normal way across a border, pick up your story from there.
Pick up my story from as in the hunt.
Yeah,
What year do you
pick,
want me to start at?
yeah, you pick a particular spot to go hunting. Tell me your hunting story.
Yeah, the hunting story starts, I think, farther back than just me crossing the border with my rifle and hunting game, because there was a particular time when the tribal council wanted me to go up and go hunting. And at that time, they wanted me just to run across the border, shoot some game, and come running right back. And because the council has elected officials, and every 2 years they have different elections for different councilmen, and for whatever reason, it was on the forefront, and then election came in, new people got elected, it got put back on the back burner. The new people come in, had a new agenda. So for 2 years, it was put aside. Next thing you know, it came up again. It was kind of going along good. It was still the same game plan: run across the border, shoot some game, come running back across. And it wasn't until like the third term, excuse me, that the director of Fish and Wildlife stepped in, Joe Pion, and he was arguing with the tribal council that they was doing it all wrong. And he says, if you want to set this up in a court case, now Joe's no lawyer or nothing, but he knows what looks good in court. And he says, well, we have to take steps if we're going to have this look good in court. And he says, we're going to go up there and have town meetings. We're going to go up and talk to the game biologists. We're going to talk to the law enforcement. We're going to talk to the other First Nations people up there, and set some good footprints down if they do take me to court. And so forth. And at that point in time there, we set up regulations. We set up limits on game, places to hunt, not to hunt, various times a year to hunt, different things like that there. The limit, you could get a tag to shoot like one animal if you wanted that particular animal, and then so forth and so on.
So do I understand that the Sinixt people and nation set up their own wildlife rules and regulations that you were then going to adhere to, that gave your trip more legitimacy? Have I got that right?
You've got that right, yes.
Okay. And then it sounds like good advice to me, because sneaking across the border, shooting something, and then running back across doesn't sound like it was going to stand up in court as a legitimate activity, because your running back and forth and sneaking around would have kind of made you a suspect. So I think that was a good decision. So, okay, you get up into what is now British Columbia and Canada in your traditional nation's territory. Do you get the elk the first day, or how's that go?
No. The first time I went up there, I joined a hunting party from the Okanogans. And while hunting with the Okanogans, I harvested an elk and a deer, and called up the game officers and told them where I was at. And we sat around and camped for a week, and nothing ever came of it. And so I loaded up what game I took some of the game home with me, very little. Most of the stuff that when I was hunting with the Okanagan Nation Alliance was for the elders of the Okanagan people. And so about 3/4 or a little more than that of the elk went with them back to the Okanogans. And from that point in time there, I came home. I couldn't find a game officer. So I went home. The next time I came back, that was in 2010 when I got the elk that the court case was based on. And hunting is hunting, okay? Fishing is fishing. There's a number of times, okay, that just before this case and other previous cases, I've been up here hunting, but I did not harvest anything. All right. So this particular time here that when I harvested the cow elk, we brought it back to my hunting camp there in the Valican area there and called up the game officers. The first day, they couldn't find us. And we give them the address. And then the second day, because it was a hunting season there in British Columbia, there was a lot of activity going on. And so they got called out to a more priority type call and didn't make it the second day. It wasn't until the third day that they came and found us and interviewed me and took a sample of the elk, give me my notice to appear and so forth, and went on.
Okay, so let me get this straight, that the
But
first time that you notify game officers that you have done this in contravention with their rules, probably, they're not interested and don't look for you. The second time, they can't find you for a couple of days. So you really have to persevere to get the authorities to pay attention to you, right?
Yes.
Well, since I'm not a hunter, let me just clarify, you can get an elk or you can get the meat across the border without any trouble?
Yes, the way the director of Fish and Wildlife, Joe Peon, set it up was that he went through all the processes of going up into Canada, talking to everyone up there, coming back into the US side, talking with them, finding out all the paperwork, the USDA stuff that you have to fill out to bring game across the border. And so he had it all in a booklet. I mean, you just had to open up the book and look at this side over here, and then it'll tell you where to place the mark on the different pages stuff. Get to the US border side, give them the paperwork, they look it over, they sign off on it, and off you go.
Okay, so how soon after all this do you get charged and start going to, you get a tour of a lot of British Columbia courts, don't you?
Yeah. The 2010 case, after almost a year, they finally take it to court. Of course, I was cited a time after that too, where my daughter and my wife harvested another cow elk, and we went right to the game office and turned ourselves in. Instead of having a game warden come look for us, we decided just to go to town and turn ourselves in. And when they said I had my court appearance, I said, fine. And so they set up a court appearance for me in Castlegar. This is the lowest court there is. And it was just to make a plea. So my wife and I get there and look down the docket, and my name's on the docket. And we sat there in the courtroom. After fashion, they're going through the domestic violences, drunken driving, and different things like this here. And he gets to my number. Well, it just goes right past it, and they keep going. And pretty soon the court takes a break. And we go up to the public defender there, Mr. Wiley. And we tell him, hey, they missed us. I'm supposed to have had a say in today's court. And he looks up at the doc and says, yeah, you were. He says, what's in there? And then I start explaining the case to him. And he grabs my hand and he starts shaking. He says, boy, I'm glad you're here and this here. And I'm going, wow, what's bringing on all this stuff? He says, if it wasn't for your people, I wouldn't be here today. And then he starts explaining the story to me about how his grandfather came during the gold rush days up into that area. And of course, he was expecting, like everybody else, to strike it rich fast and get out of there. And all he had was the pick and shovel. And the winter set him in. And it was the Sinixt people that took him in and brought him through the winter. And so he was very grateful for that there. He says, yeah, it would be. And so I explained and stuff. And he was the first lawyer that told me, you got a good case. I think this may go all the way to the Supreme Court. But I think you're going to be an old man by the time you get there.
But
Yes, I am.
but meanwhile, just like with the conservation officers, you have to make your presence known to the court because they're ignoring you.
Well, yes, it's an invisibility. When we was talking to the game biologists up there, they was very friendly and everything else, but they couldn't share no information with us about the different stuff that we wanted to know because we weren't recognized there in that part of the country. We were extinct.
Now
So we're kind of invisible.
This lawyer, a nice lawyer that you met in Castlegar, did he explain to you why the court had skipped your case? Was that just a clerical error, or how did you end up actually getting your court date?
Yeah. The clerical error was that the game officers that cited me, the mix-up was from one citation to another. And the citation that they had, they couldn't find the people that wrote the citation. And so they had to get this other one that what they was originally on the docket for, then they had to find those two officers. We went there to make my plea, guilty or not guilty, okay? Since they couldn't find the officers, the judge reassigned me, says, come back in 3 months and with the docket. And so we came back in 3 months. And for whatever reason, the prosecution wasn't ready. So the judge says, well, come back in 3 months. And so we come back another time, 3 months. And at that time there, they was having a teleconference with my lawyer in Vancouver with the thing there. And because they couldn't make the connection solid enough, they told me to come back in 4 months. Okay, hang on here. Okay, if you kept track, 3, 6, 9, and finally come back again a year later, I finally get to stand up in front of the judge and say, I'm not guilty. And then from that point in time there, it's another year later before we finally go to Nelson to the trial.
Okay, so in going to court is a nervous situation, even if it's small claims court. How did you feel? Did you have to testify and were you grilled, or how'd it go?
In trial that we had in Nelson stuff, yes, I was on the stand for quite some time. And yes, the prosecution and my lawyer and stuff, they grilled me pretty good. Nervous? Yes, I was very nervous.
But isn't the case pretty simple? You came up, you shot an elk, you took it back to what is now the United States. I mean, were they questioning you about indigenous rights or your heritage or constitutional matters or what?
There was a lot of that brought up in the court. The first particular court case in Nelson took almost a month of testimony, faxes, different evidence that people brought in. So it was a very long, lengthy trial. I think probably during the trial, I was feeling pretty good. It wasn't until everybody said, we're done, and then we sent it to the judge for her decision. And from that point in time there to the decision time, that's when I get kind of nervous.
Well, sure, and you won, I gather, and then how did you come to go through another court process in British Columbia?
The first appeal process is from the regional government, which is just one appeal judge looking over the first trial judge's rulings and whatnot. And that took dang near another year for that their ruling to come back favorable on my side. Time went by, then the British Columbia government, they appealed it. And we went to Vancouver. where 3 judges looked over the trial judges and the first appeal judge's decision. And we sat there in Vancouver for about 3-4 days, I think it was, and just listening to different stuff that the lawyers were putting out. And then we had to wait around for their decision.
Now,
Yes, and then it came.
I'm interested, of course, in all the trivia, like what hotel did you stay in Vancouver, and did you go up to the revolving restaurants? But maybe that's too trivial. Who paid for all this?
The tribe paid for all of this here, all the room and board and stuff like that there. As at the time I was working for the Colville Confederate Tribe as a fish and game officer. And so
Now, on the appeal, the 2 sets of appeals, did they continue to ask you questions about your heritage, your ancestry, your nation's use of the land and so on, those kinds of questions?
not me myself, okay? I was never put on the stand after the first trial judge heard what I had to say. After that, it was all in appeal, and in appeals decision and stuff, you can't bring new evidence in. You can't make any more testimonies. Everything has got to just be presented as it was at the first, and then the appeal judges make their decision on that.
The reason I ask you that, Rick, is if I were involved in a court case and someone said, well, how did your grandfather come to Canada? I would say, well, I think he got off a boat in Parsboro, Nova Scotia. And if I was asked, did he go through an immigration process? Did he fill out any forms? I don't know. And I used to live near the Quebec-Vermont border near Highwater. And if I were asked, has that always been part of what is now Canada? Was it ever part of some other country? I'm not sure I'd have an excellent knowledge of history. So that would have been a huge burden to put on you. But I gather that your nation, and we call them different things in Canada, but nation as opposed to the American term tribe. But I guess they had to marshal all this information to convince the courts. Is that right?
Yes. My particular tribe, which is the Sinixt, which is a member of the Colville Confederate Tribe, home territory runs quite far up into British Columbia, all the way up in the Revelstoke area, up the dang near the headwaters of the Columbia River. My ancestry is there in the ground. Archaeologists have been digging it up forever. And first contact with Thompson, all the different explorers and stuff like that there, knew that these people were there. It was a huge community at one time before the smallpox epidemic, the mining, logging, different stuff like that there, whittled it down to hardly what it is today and what it was then. At that point in time there, when it came to my ancestry, I believe they used my great-grandmother, Justina, probably as an anchor point because of her marriage to Richard Fry. And the documents behind her lineage and stuff like that there really anchors my lineage to the case.
Okay, but we're not through your ordeals or your tour of the court system in Canada. You go to the Supreme Court. Do you actually go to Ottawa, or is this held by Zoom during the pandemic? Or tell me about your Supreme Court experience.
Yes, I did go to Ottawa. And yes, they wouldn't let me into the court. Me and 2 other of my friends went with me that I was very grateful for. Since they had more knowledgeable about travel and stuff than I do. And we went out there and sat on the courthouse steps for 2 or 3 days.
What on earth was hang on, what on earth was the excuse for not letting you into a courtroom in which your case was being decided?
That there was probably the decision of the court in the pandemic era that we're in. As that they were just letting just very few people, if anybody, just the lawyers, more or less, and their legal staff behind them into the courtroom.
Okay, let's give them that. That makes some sort of sense. By the way, you probably could have talked to the Algonquins, who never ceded that land, lost it in war, sold it, bargained it away, nothing. They probably still own Parliament Hill and Algonquin Park. You might have asked them, but that might have muddied the waters. Okay, so you're sitting on the
We
courtroom.
had,
You're sitting on the courtroom steps like hippies used to in the 60s at the courthouse in Vancouver. Sorry, that's coming to mind, but you're sitting there on the courtroom steps. And how do you find out what's going on? Do your lawyers come out? Does Mark Underhill come out or Paul Williams come out and tell you what happened that day?
no, it was, the courtroom proceedings were on Zoom. Okay.
Hmm.
And because of the technology of my partner and stuff like that, there, the person's kind of documenting all this stuff. He just, his smartphone, you could watch all the court proceedings that was going on there at the same time that it was happening in the courtroom.
All right. And where are you when you hear the result and what happens?
Where am I at when I hear the results of the Supreme Court decision?
Yeah, I asked you first.
I'm standing. I'm standing on the banks of the Columbia River in a place called Kettle Falls, a historical fisheries on the Columbia River that many nations and tribes used as a major fisheries at the early point of time before Grand Coulee Dam backed up the water and made it into Lake Roosevelt. There was a historical spot there as the falls were being undermined and flooded away by the backwaters of Grand Coulee Dam, that there was a number of chiefs watching us here. And there was a picture of them standing on these rocks, watching as the water was raising and the falls were disappearing. And so our coordinator, Shelley Davis, she suggested that we go to that particular area since we couldn't go to Canada. And that particular area there was our kind of like the Sinixt most southern boundary right there. She said, let's go there and we'll hear the decision. And so she's the one that sets up the Zoom meetings here. And she set it up there, right on a rock out there by the lake. And there was probably 30, 40, 50 people there. And it wasn't an easy place to get to. And I don't think Shelley really advertised it that much because she knew there was going to be very limited space there. And we set it up there and Mark came on the screen and told us the decision. And everybody, I did. I hooped and hollered and did my happy dance and everything. And yeah, it's a very long battle.
Well, that's fantastic. Now, and thank you for your perseverance. It's nice to clarify this. We have a constitution in Canada that was, you could either call it new or was amended in 1982. And so we're still working through what some of it means. And that takes it through the court system. As one American jurist one time said, well, we have a constitution, but the constitution is what judges say it is. So there's an ongoing employment security for lawyers there. Let me ask you some other lineage questions just for fun. Desautel, of course, is also a great French name, and a lot of French explorers, de la Vérendrye and others, went far out west. There are French settlements in Edmonton, Murdochville in British Columbia, Gravelbourg in Saskatchewan. Do you feel very French?
Yes. My another one of my relatives and stuff, he followed our French ancestry all the way across Canada. A lot of Desautels over there in the would it be Ottawa, I think, or just up above Lake Superior up in there. And yeah, followed all the way across the Atlantic Ocean back to France, and the different parts of things that go with the name and where it got its surname and what it was before the surname. And yeah, he followed it way back there.
Well, I always guessed when I was in Ottawa, if someone greeted me in French at reception, I knew I was probably dressed fairly well because they thought I was French. That's one of the advantages. Now, Rick, another crazy question. A dear friend of mine the late Ken Kansas, his name should be spoken, who's a wonderful man. He once said to me, we think of you Canadians as just like us. And he was, of course, American, Greek, Italian from New York. And he was trying to be very affectionate, but we don't want to be just like Americans. We want to be Canadians and different. And so I say to you with some reservation and trepidation, do you feel very Canadian?
Oh, yes, I do feel very Canadian. In fact, my ancestors were Canadian before you was a Canadian.
Before I was?
Yes.
I think you mean before there was a Canada.
Yeah, before there was a Canada.
So it's kind of an interesting time-space continuum question to be Canadian before there was a Canada. Now, your lawyer, Mark Underhill, who seems to be a great guy, he talked about how he is pretty sure that it will eventually be realized that you and many people like you are indeed Canadian, or dual citizenship, or triple citizenship, or something. Here's a really unfair question for you, because you're not a lawyer, but how do you think this is going to shake down in the future with Indigenous people from the US who have ties to Canada coming across to exercise their constitutionally protected rights?
How this is going to shake out for me, when I first started this, was for my children, my grandchildren, and their children, so forth and so on, to show them that we have roots that go very deep, and that that imaginary line there that separates our two countries doesn't separate our heritage, that we just didn't appear one day on the American side and there's nothing on the other side with that extinction clause, that we do have relatives up there and we do have roots up there. We were there, like the time memorial says,
Well, and you do have rights up here.
Children. Yes, yes.
Well, it's interesting. I think people of goodwill have to take a moment to get their minds around this. But what has come to my mind is that I've traveled across borders with UN identification, not a passport. I've crossed the American border several dozen times without a passport or even any ID. There are dual citizenships. There are diplomatic passports. I'm not sure how the American government is going to look at this, because I don't think they like dual citizens. And I think you lose American citizenship if you vote in a foreign election. So there are a lot of administrative laws and niceties and unniceties to get through, eh?
Yeah. Yeah. It opens up hopefully a very pleasant Pandora's box.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Rick, as you can tell, I'm a former broadcaster and a blabbermouth and talk too much. So why don't we give you the last few words? Is there anything else you'd like to say about this historic ruling?
Just that it's been a long trip. When I very first started out with this here, I started out with that intention in mind to, if nothing else, just to tell my grandchildren or my children that we have rights up there. I may get arrested, I may get incarcerated, but I'm going to go up there and I'm going to do this. And when the tribe gave me the opportunity to do what I did, I was very grateful to them. Yes.
Well, Rick, if I may amend what I just said, I'm not giving you the last word, because I just want to double down on that and say, not only can you tell your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, but they and their children will be reading R.V. Desautel. And you got to tell them that's Regina versus Desautel, because that's Her Majesty. And the Desautel is you, right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, we had another great decision. We had another great decision that went to the Supreme Court here in the United States early on, due to a hunting case on what is now called the north half of the Colville Reservation. The Colville Reservation used to take in, boy, at one time it took in Pend Oreille County, Stevens County, Ferry County, and Okanagan County. And then they just started cutting us back to where it was just Ferry County and Okanagan County. And then gold was discovered up in the Republic area. And so they bought us out on that part up there. And the Antwine case, where he was still living in the north half up in Republic area, hunted game, and state officers arrested him just the same as the Canadian officers arrested me, and it went to the Supreme Court in the United States here, and we won our hunting and fishing rights back up there in the north half.
Well, there you are. Now
we never relinquished that part.
Now you do have the last word. Thank you, Rick.
Well, yeah, it is the north half now.
All the best. Have a good day.
Thank you, Alan.